Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberker. Protesters in Sweden burned the Quran once again following demonstrations outside the country's parliament. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan responded sharply, suggesting that Sweden's unacceptable behaviour cannot remain under the guise of freedom of expression any longer. Over the past year, Turkiye has voiced strong opposition to growing anti-Muslim hate crimes in Nordic countries. Both Sweden and its neighbour Denmark have come under pressure for allowing anti-Islamic acts to take place. The frequent burning of the Muslim holy book has set off waves of protests across several countries, including Iraq, Iran and Pakistan. Denmark's Foreign Minister Lars Rasmussen recently said the country will seek ways to make the burning of the Quran illegal for the sake of its own national security. Meanwhile, the Organisation of Islamic Cooperation convened an emergency meeting to discuss appropriate action to curb the growing tide of Islamophobia. And to further discuss Turkey's reaction to anti-Islamic protests in Europe, joining me now from Amsterdam is Jan Raat. He is a professor of urban sociology at the University of Amsterdam, and from Istanbul, Tarık Oğuzlu. He is a professor of international relations at Aydın University. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Jan, what's the current situation in Sweden? Has the burning of the Quran become a nuisance for Swedish authorities lately?
It has become a nuisance for Swedish authorities for several reasons. First of all, it's an indication that social relations within the country is to some extent problematic. And at the same time, it impacts the international relations of Sweden with other parts of the world. So it is a nuisance. What makes it really a nuisance is the fact that it's at odds with one of the most important elements of the Swedish constitution, namely the freedom of speech. And so it's difficult to address the issue of the burning of holy books and at the same time maintain that there is a freedom of speech.
So, Tarek, Sweden's Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson has said the security situation in the country is at its most serious level since World War II. What was he hinting at?
I think he was referring to two simultaneous developments. On the one hand, maybe he was talking about the ongoing war in Ukraine and its possible repercussions on Swedish security interests, in particular in the context of Russian-Swedish relationship, maybe also referring to the emerging Cold War era. But on the other hand, maybe he was referring to the internal chaotic environment in Sweden itself, because so many people are quite unhappy with what has taken place in recent days, even though, as the previous speaker has underlined, there is a very strong determination to keep freedom of speech as sacred as possible. But on the other hand, a great part of civil society is very skeptical about such kind of actions taking place in the country. Maybe some people protest might even take place, or maybe he is referring to Islamic people living in Sweden. Maybe those people are feeling quite unhappy with this latest blasphemy kind of activities. Maybe they might go to the streets and organize some anti-governmental protests. So he might be referring to many things in one single sentence.
So, Jan, what's your take on the Swedish Prime Minister's statements? I mean, is he really concerned about the risk of retaliatory attacks, maybe by terrorists?
Well, that's something that you can never exclude, those risks. But it seems to me that Sweden is at the moment in a very vulnerable position because they want to join NATO.
Yes.
And for that, they need to have the collaboration of a lot of the international powers. And at the same time, if they would maintain that, listen, we have the freedom of speech, so we are very liberal, that would jeopardize their international connections. So I think to some extent it's a statement that is sort of to send a message that we understand. We try to appreciate your sentiments vis-a-vis the burning of the Quran in this case.
So you just recently talked about how the social relations in the country is problematic. So the question is, how is Sweden going to emerge from its dilemma between the outrage over Quran burning protests and its commitment to free speech?
Well, personally, I think that the commitment to free speech is never absolute, because the Holocaust or the denial of the Holocaust is in many countries not allowed, despite the fact that there is a freedom of speech. Secondly, it's clear that in various ways the authorities, the national or the local authorities, try to prevent those events happening by referring to public order. So you can say, well, you can say whatever you want, but not on this place and not now. Thirdly, I think they need time. It's just because these type of events, these sort of explosions of anger or concerns, they have happened in the past multiple times. And in the end of the day, things will calm down. We had the issue 20 years ago about the cartoons. That was something that was particularly important in Denmark. It caused an enormous reaction from several constituencies in the Muslim world. But to a large extent, it was sort of just sit back, relax, don't panic, try to stay in control, and then eventually things return to normal. That doesn't exclude the diplomatic attempts that take place at the same time.
So, Tarek, would you agree? I mean, Jan says we need to calm down and wait for protests and maybe those sentiments to die down. But do you believe that amid the discussions of Sweden's full membership in NATO, some circles are exploiting this?
It might be quite possible, because we know that these pro-Kurdish circles in civil society, or the people who are very keen on respecting this freedom of speech, even in the name of acting very much against the sacred symbols of religions, they are not happy to see that maybe Sweden joins NATO. Maybe they might be organizing some activities to sabotage this process. And we already know that Turkey has not given its full green light to Swedish membership. You know, the process is still going on. So the Turkish parliament needs to convene and approve for this membership to take place, actually. And we also know that nowadays there is a strong reaction on the part of many Muslim majority countries against what Swedish and Danish authorities have been doing. So this might not somehow contribute to this eventual outcome of Swedish membership in NATO. This is quite dangerous from their own perspective.
So, Jan, just recently, Swedish government said it's going to reintroduce internal border controls to help Sweden to overcome its security concerns. So since these protests took place, the Swedish police is said to have received more applications asking for permission to burn religious texts. So is this a deadlock we're facing here?
No, the request to have the permission to burn books is a standard procedure in those countries, because it's an act that takes place in public space, and you need to have permission in the same way as you need to have permission for a parade or whatsoever. So that would give the authorities an opportunity to say, we don't give you permission because we are very concerned. We think that public order will be jeopardized. Something else that is also very important, and that's a sentiment that should not be underestimated. People in Sweden feel very uncomfortable by the idea that non-democratic societies, or societies that have a tendency to exert authoritarian rules, that they tell Sweden what to do, and they tell Sweden that they should control and reduce freedom of speech. And that's a sentiment that should not be understated, because it's these two ideologies are strange bedfellows.
Yes. So, Tarek, attacks against the Quran and other holy books are still not outlawed in many European countries, as we see. So could this change since Denmark is considering banning protests involving the burning of the Quran and other religious texts?
I think it should change, because now we are living in difficult times in terms of peace and stability in the global community of human beings, because if you create further divisions between different cultural and societal segments of people, this will not contribute to international peace and security. And we all know that the idea of multiculturalism, the idea of secularism, the idea of tolerance, these are the core principles of European integration process. And these countries, these Nordic European countries, also pay respect to such kind of values. But if they are so keen to keep these particular values intact, they need to find a way to peacefully coexist with these people in their home countries. So they should show much more respect to their secret symbols. So I'm sure that Danish authorities and Swedish authorities have already made it very clear that they are seriously considering to take some actions to outlaw such kind of actions. So maybe some positive developments might take place in the days to come.
So, Jan, how are these protests affecting the Nordic countries' relations with the Muslim world, as well as their images as tolerant countries?
Well, images are just images, but no, because reality is always much more complicated. It has been clear in the past few decades that the loss of tensions within Danish society or Norwegian society or Swedish society, as in many other European countries, and this is sort of just another element that's heating it up. At the same time, we should keep in mind that these kind of issues, the sort of potential for violence, forms of extremism, we find them in many spheres of life. A few years ago, there were book burnings of Harry Potter books because they were seen as unchristian. And many other books or say symbols of particular ideologies or religions that they have been attacked in violent ways. So I'm very hesitant to see this as a very unique thing, as a standoff. I don't see any reason to protect the Quran and not to protect other, say, holy books. But if you want to protect holy books, you should also protect Das Kapital from Karl Marx, because for some people, that's an important book. So where do you stop? And so I think it's important for people in Muslim countries, notably for the authorities, to understand that, yes, they have the right to ask the Swedes to respect their the symbols of their religion. I think it's a matter of decency, for starters. But at the same time, they should understand that they are not in a unique position, and there are many other forms of and expressions of religion that deserve an equal appreciation.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.